Mario, we got Chris here on the line. What do you want to ask him?
What would you do to challenge your assumptions and beliefs? I
Mhm.
think a lot of people struggle, but also it's not necessarily part of real estate, but it's more like how you can become a better on that. What is that you do to take away that assuming part? Yeah.
Partnership is key to real
Yeah.
estate. Have someone you want to be like and look how they've done it and kind of try to follow in their footsteps. Which attorneys did they use? Which property managers
Mhm.
did they use? Contractors. You
Right.
can go miles ahead by using the same systems that someone else has done before you. The big part of getting rid of the assumption part of it is yes, in the beginning, you're going to make a couple guesses. You can limit those guesses by surrounding yourself with the partners and the great team.
I'm Brian Briscoe, host of the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. And this podcast is different than everything else out there. I bring together a new and an experienced investor on each episode, and I let the aspiring investor ask the questions that they need answered. So if you're an aspiring investor yourself, you probably will have the exact same questions. Now, before we get to this episode, make sure you hit the subscribe button below and that little bell to make sure you get notified every time we post a new episode. And now, enjoy the show. Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe. Very excited for today's show. We got two amazing guys on the line with us today. Our experienced investor for today is Chris Levarek, and our aspiring investor, Mario Rapaj. As is tradition, first up is the experienced investor. So, Chris, let's get to know you a little better. How you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show. It's been a long time coming. So I think we've been running in the same circles for a while, but just haven't connected for the podcast yet. So happy to have you on the show.
Good to be here. Yeah.
So do us a favor and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So let's see. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. I got started in investing in 2018. I've been in IT space. So I was a W-2 earner for a long time coming. Exited the military about 2010. I was a firefighter in the United States Air Force. Okay. And jumped into IT. So I went to school, got my IT degree, computer information systems, and worked in an IT career ever since until about March of this year when I quit my W-2 job. So you'll notice I started investing in 2018, but I quit in 2022. And so I was one of those guys working the W-2 job while investing in real estate.
Yeah.
My first investment was 2 duplexes in Durham, North Carolina. So that was remote to me. I was in Phoenix, so I did everything remote. Every deal I did since then has been a partnership. So even that first one, I worked with a private lender and we scaled up. I did a lot of small multifamily, anything from 2 to 4 units for a good year. And then I went into a 13 unit, a 16 unit, partnered up again, went into 84 units, 120 units, all apartment complex. Yeah. And from there, we did some vacation rentals too, built a business around it, and it's been a ride. So
nice. So started in 2018 and it took you 4 years to leave your W-2. Let's talk about that since it was fairly recently. What was your kind of metric before leaving your W-2? And, looking back at it, would you have done it earlier or would you have waited longer?
Yeah, so I'd say I'm of the more conservative nature. I made great money in IT. If you can have a W-2 job and invest on the side, I find it's a great combo. You don't need to do one or the other if you can have the time. IT gives you a lot of time and space. So I was contemplating it probably a year before because I had the ability to quit. I just, I didn't have the runway, I guess, or the earnings to really ease my risk adverse mind. So I really had to work up to it. And it was only when we, had some good sales in 2021 and the market was awesome that I was able to say, hey, I'm going to take a shot in this business. I can always come back to W-2,
Yeah. And so something that I've looked at, I left my W-2 a year ago, but I've got a pension because I went 20 in the military, but it's definitely different. It's when you have that W-2 and your real estate investing on the side, when you get the acquisition fees, when you sell properties, that's all gravy. That's all, for me, it was money getting reinvested. But, as soon as it was kind of a different feeling for me after I retired. And, when that money came in, it wasn't like, okay, I can reinvest 100% of this. It was more of all right, now how much do I have to set aside for living expenses? But anyway, a little bit different for me. And I think everybody experiences that in their own way.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, congratulations for going full time. I'm sure it'll work out for you guys.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit more about doing kind of dual hat IT on one side and apartment investing on the other side. How did you work that out? How did you make that happen?
Right. So yeah, there's some careers where you can have a little more free time, especially if you're very 4 hour work week, like Tim Ferriss type idea. IT is one of those. If you're working remotely and you are able to automate things, you're pretty savvy and you can get your work done, you can get your job done. You can do things during your lunch breaks, during after hours, before hours, even sometimes ending the day early because you're working the weekend or something like that for IT. That was fairly common in my industry. So I was able to coordinate, closings of properties or looking at deals in my off time, and then leveraging teams in those states that I was in. That was a big thing for me. And if someone's considering going into investing, if you can really engineer that you're not doing the work, you're going to be able to do this a lot better. So you want to leverage your partners, leverage your team. And there's really no way to do that better than investing out of state because you just can't be there.
Yeah, and the nice thing about it is there's a lot of different roles in multifamily, and most roles can be done remotely. So that's the really nice thing about it. Now let's talk about team. I know one of your teammates, and your company name is just a rearrangement of your last name letters, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
All right. So, and you partnered with your brother. How did that come about? I mean, did you guys both have the same ideas on, or one person convinced the other? Tell me how that came about.
Right. So 2018, the big aha for me was watching. They actually raised interest rates back then too, very slightly, and it caused this dip in the market, which caused a dip in my 401k. So for me, I was dumping like 10% of that every check, and it's like, man, there's got to be something else here because this doesn't seem to be earning a lot and going up that fast. So that's when I decided to listen to Bigger Pockets and get more into real estate. My brother, he had a connection in the military. I think he was deployed at the time. The guy was mentioning he was buying some condos and flipping them and renting them out and that kind of thing. And that got the wheels turned for him. And we both just decided, hey, it'll be easier if we go in together. We can pool our capital together and make this happen and buy some property. Now, we had some Roth IRA money. I mean, it wasn't even, I think I had like $25,000. It wasn't that much. And that's one of the reasons we picked a market where we could afford to buy in. And then we partnered with a private lender to bring the rest of it.
Yep.
So we figured out what our problem was. We figured out, what our goal was. And then we partnered together because they were very similar. And we've been close for all our lives. So it made sense to, we didn't have an idea to do business, though. I can tell you that. It was really just, let's try this out.
Yeah. So started small and then grew from there. So speaking of growing, what were some of the challenges going? I mean, you mentioned your first duplex in Durham, and I think the numbers went from like 2 to 2 to 13 to 16, and then got big really quickly. What were some of the challenges going from like the duplexes to the larger apartment complexes?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the challenges come around. Initially, you're trying to fathom how you're going to do a bigger deal, how you're going to raise capital for a bigger deal. How are you going to afford $1 million property when, I think the first duplex I bought was $104,000. And we bought two of them at the same time, but that was a big deal back then. And then all of a sudden you start scaling. You're like, okay, $1 million property. Now I actually need a bigger attorney and I need a bigger property manager.
Yep.
And now I got to vet these people because my previous connections didn't work. And so you're constantly upping your team and skill set. And I think part of it is not trying to do it all yourself. Definitely leverage out the people who have the experience. And don't be afraid to quit those who are not letting you grow, not letting you expand. I mean, I've changed, closing attorneys so many times and property managers so many times just because it didn't work out. So I think part of that is like, look at it as a business, looking as you are an investor, yes, but you are a business. You're building a business by buying a property. The property is a business. It has income and expenses. So if you want that business to succeed, you better partner with those who will give it the best chance to succeed and not try to be the master of every scenario. So that was a big learning curve for me, especially. I think a lot of engineers too, they like controlling all the aspects.
Yeah.
And it's important to give up a lot and realize what you're good at.
Yeah, and something you keep on coming back to is partners and leveraging, and I think that is absolutely vital to this business. It's not a one-man show, and it never will be. And if you are a one-man show, you're not going to get very far. But definitely be able to leverage other people, other people's time, other people's efforts, and it's definitely going to help you go a lot further. What's that saying? If you want to go fast, go wait. I'm going to screw it up. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. And that's kind of the same thing with real estate. If you want to do things quickly, you might want to. It's easier to do it by yourself. If you want to go a long, long way, you've got to partner up. You've got to leverage other people's time. So anyway, appreciate all you've said about that. Very, very intriguing and very true. So let's talk a little bit about, some of the properties you've done. If you can go into a little bit of detail on, one of them, and, pick your first or your favorite or your most recent, and let's talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, I'll go in because this is, people probably W-2 investors are thinking of doing some of this themselves. I'll go into our first syndication we ever did. It was actually a 16 unit. Mm-hmm. So up to that period, every deal we did, like I said, we still partnered, but they were joint ventures, private lenders. The first syndication we did with, it was about 10 different investors. That was a 16 unit apartment complex in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And that deal was fun just because it was our first time working with a securities attorney, working with these bigger players. And we just really felt inexperienced in the whole deal. And we did it all ourselves. I'll admit we made some mistakes. Mm-hmm. Besides the property manager, we really took on a lot of the roles. We did the acquisitions. We got the security, the PPM documents together. We raised the capital. Mm-hmm. We turned the units. We made the renovation plan, asset management. I mean, the whole thing we did besides the actual of leasing up the units. Mm-hmm. With the property manager handled a lot of that. But yeah, it was a great deal. So we bought it for about $960, if my memory serves me. So this was 2000. It was the beginning of 2020, mm-hmm. and we bought that. Yeah, $960, 16 units. They were all 2-bedroom, mm-hmm. and so a small family could stay there. And if you don't know Fayetteville, North Carolina, it's surrounding Fort Bragg. Yep. So there's a huge industry there. It's a mini city, and the biggest base in the world, actually. So we had demand, we had cash flow. It was a great property. We ended up selling it in end of 2021 for about 1.9 million. So 2 years later, we roughly doubled the value. And it was a great deal. I think it was like a 52% IRR for our investors. Yeah. I kind of wish I had invested in myself. I think I underwrote it at like a 16% IRR.
You get a 50% IRR. Now, I mean, granted, I think when you purchased it in early 2020, you had no idea that the Fed would pump trillions of dollars in the economy and prices would go gangbusters. But something you just said, I've said over and over again on some of our deals that have come full cycle. It's like, man, I wish I would have invested in that one, or I wish I would have invested more in that one, because when I'm seeing, 30 plus, percent annualized returns, some of the properties and as syndicators, especially starting out, I think most syndicators have the same issue is, you don't have enough cash to invest in everything, especially if you do 3 or 4 or 5 syndications in a single year. It's like, okay, I can put money in this one. I'll have to skip the next one and go from there. But yeah, same thing for me. Every time one of these things sells, I'm like, man, I wish I would have invested more. Well, cool. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your motivation, something I call your big burning why. So why do you do what you do?
Yeah, I mean, my response might be a little different, I guess, than most people. It was more, I was bored in IT. I also saw it didn't match my end goal. I would see leaders in the IT industry and in corporate America that were working more hours and unhappy and weren't motivated. And then they weren't even spending time with their family anyway. So I actually started investing when my first son was born. And it really aligned with this idea that, what am I teaching my kid to do? What am I helping them try to see the world as? To just keep working and doing something that doesn't really make you happy, but you have those golden handcuffs and you're really like, mm-hmm. You're making that money and then you can buy them nice things, but you're never there. Like, it wasn't a message I wanted to teach my family, and it wasn't how I wanted to live my life. I kind of wanted to really have that heroic life where someone goes, wow, you did a lot of stuff. And that didn't seem to align with the W-2 job. Whereas investing in real estate and the thrill of closing the deals and the thrill of working with other people and talking about these big apartment complexes and all the value they're bringing, not only the people renting it, but the people who are managing it. And, it's a huge issue in the United States, housing alone. So being able to work on something that actually had, let's say, more purpose, not only for me and my family to show them what they could do something they like doing, but also provide something meaningful. That's kind of where I came from. I really wanted that fun life, that giving back, that purpose, and then that's why I do it.
Love it. I love it. Thanks for sharing that. Now, last question for you before we bring Mario on, and that's what's next?
What's next? Okay, so we have a lot going on. We are working on a 224 unit in Houston, Texas right now. That'll be closing in February. So we are, working to get that one closed. We usually do two to four apartment complexes still per year as a syndication. We launched a course. We've done 5 vacation rentals as well. We syndicated vacation rentals, luxury vacation rentals. So we launched a course, Vacation Rental Masterclass. That's coming out in January. My brother's writing a book, so that's coming out. Yeah, that's where we're at. We're anxious to do a couple more vacation rentals. We have a fund as well, a 506c fund. I'd love to fund short-term rental opportunities as well as apartments in the coming year. So
nice. Well, it sounds like you're going to have a great year coming up. I love it. I've dabbled in the short-term rental space. I haven't done a whole lot there, but I think there's goodness on both sides of the fence. But good luck with that short-term rental course. Hope you guys knock it out of the park. Well, that said, we're going to shift gears. And Mario, how are you doing today?
Thank you, Brian, for having me. I'm enjoying the podcast right here. And I would say that I would connect with a lot of points that Chris talked today, even though we don't necessarily know each other. I'm happy to talk about that a little bit. But it was interesting that I would find all those connecting points. And I guess everybody that tries to do multifamily or, real estate, usually the end goal is to have that freedom of time and be able to spend more time with family.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I mean, I've asked what's your big burning why question now, probably 500 times or more. And, most of the answers are similar. It's people have different spins on it, but time, freedom, and legacy tend to be the two biggest things. Legacy, whether it's a financial legacy or whether it's a personal legacy, what you leave with your kids or how you spend your time. Those are the two things that keep on popping back up.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Brian. I have a non-conventional background. I am originally from Europe, and I have studied music education, and studied piano since I was 6 years old. I come from Albania originated. I studied in Germany, and then my master's in Czech Republic. End up here marrying a Frisco, beautiful lady.
Nice.
However, today I see myself here talking a podcast about investments and real estate. I would say that one of the most interesting thing is that it's been since I've been 17, I read Kiyosaki's book and Donald Trump, and I know that those create a lot of noise out there, but they were translated in Albanian, and I don't know how. I feel like it's something that most of the people or entrepreneur have that feeling of building. And I remember when I was 17, I worked with the business, which my father also had. And then later on, I opened a car wash. And in the same time, I was studying my undergrad. So anyway, to wrap it up a little bit more about where I come from, there's a lot of things going on in Albania when I was living there. It was a post-communist country. The culture was different from what we're used to or what it is in America. So everybody waits from government to do things. And I feel like maybe that's here too a little bit. It's like, my name is socialism, I guess, but I'm not going to enter on the political part. But what I lived when I was young is that the system was completely corrupt, and we had a lot of issues with the banking system. It was a civil war when I was young, and all those things. When I moved to Germany or Czech Republic, and later on in the States, I was it was like always were new windows. You had all those opportunities, all those things you could do. And I started here as a working as an insurance agent. I got my property and casualty license, and then I studied solo music, so I had to shift and continue with what I have studied. So I taught in a very prestigious school, private school in Dallas, and at the same time, I built my private piano lessons, which allowed me, and I want to thank Dante Andrades, which also is like another multifamily investor.
Mhm.
He helped me in the beginning to start that music studio to be able to quit my job in 2020, which was my full-time teaching, as I was, being able to support myself and my family with that private studio and all the
Mhm.
being able to make six figures with that. But the whole goal, like to continue that question that we talked a little bit early, is that for me, I was doing this and I related so much with Chris when he mentioned he got bored. I studied that, and actually, it's a term people can get burned out, but also people can get bored out. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
I was teaching for the last 4 or 5 years, and I was doing the same thing. I was not growing. I mean, what could you be doing, you know? And it felt to me like, yes, I am helping the new generation, but like I did not receive that fulfillment, and
Mhm.
was not only financial, but it's like the career wise, what you want to do, what you want to help, like you see your potential that you can do more, you can do better things. And gradually I shifted gears towards real estate, which I started in 2019. First investment, of course I did study earlier that first investment as a LP. And I mean, there are two investments I've been doing as a passive investors, and there's like 375 units, about $50 million. But as I said, that was not even fulfilling too, because I did it and then you just wait
Yeah.
for that proceeds. At the same time, I wanted to go and I was exploring every avenue. So I did all the prerequisite and started
Mhm.
MBA at UT Dallas.
Mhm.
And after 2 semesters, dropped out. So that was another thing to myself. It's a great program. They were preparing me for corporate, and I did not want that.
Mhm.
I have a master. I did not want another master just to go on cocktail party and say I have an MBA. You know, the whole
Yeah.
goal for me was to be able to improve my skills and knowledge so I could continue to reach out to becoming a general partner.
Mhm.
And that led me to the last step, which I am right now. I'm working with Michael Blank program, and I've been doing a lot of underwriting, and that's like my goal, for the next couple of years, but next year particularly, to be able to put some
Yeah.
of those as a GP on my portfolio.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for sharing. And you're right. It's not the standard story. I mean, communist country or post-communist country through several countries in Europe to the U.S. And yeah, appreciate you for sharing all of that. Now, you did talk a little bit about your why, but if you can like boil that down into a couple of sentences, what's your big burning why?
I would start with being a musician. It requires a lot of work. I don't know if any of you guys, the background on if you play the music instrument, but it requires hours and hours on practicing.
Mhm. Yeah.
And the other thing with music is that it's not just like you can play a song.
Mhm.
When you study it, you are trained to be doing things 100%. You cannot be like, I mean, even sports is like if you're 87%, if you're 90%, you're good. In music, you have to be 100% if you're not.
Mhm.
It does not work. However, what I notice is that performing musicians,
Yep.
you work on the time that everybody else is having a weekend with
Mhm.
their family, with their child. And the last thing that everybody knows as a teacher, talking about financial
Yeah.
part, it's not sustainable. I did not necessarily want it, to become the richest man and all the things that we can hear, but it's important
Yeah.
because I know some people are very naive about that topic, but like we live in a world like that. We have to accept that it's important to have a financial freedom to be able to, not live paycheck to paycheck, not stress out about it, but be able also to provide for your family and your kid and your wife, and also be able not just to provide financially, but spend time with that. Because what is life in the end of the day? So those are some of the things that went through my mind, and I try to
Yeah.
touch everything in a little bit. But basically, it's the financial freedom and the time, ability to spend time and to travel and
Yeah.
to be able to go to my daughter's recital and game and participate and spend time with her when she does her homework instead of just being on my computer and taking my work with me home.
Absolutely. Love it. Well, hey, thanks for sharing that. Well, we come to my favorite part of the podcast, and it's the part where I say, Mario, we got Chris here on the line. What do you want to ask him?
I'm interested to know that what would you do to challenge your assumptions and beliefs? Like that's something that I think a lot of people struggle, but also it's not necessarily part of real estate, but it's more like how you can become a better on that. What is that you do to take away that assuming part? Like people always will like be like, oh, it should be this way because I see that. How do you function with that? How do you collaborate with that part?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, like anything, you'll never be an expert from the start. We're huge on partnership, and I think I need to write a book on it, but partnership is key to real estate. And especially because you are never going to be a master underwriter. Even if you underwrite 100 deals forever, until you buy that first one, you're still not going to be an expert. And so you want to be around people who are doing it, who have done it, and have that person, even if you don't pay the mentor 30K, whatever, at least have someone you want to be like and look how they've done it and kind of try to follow in their footsteps. Which attorneys did they use? Which property managers did they use? Contractors. You can go miles ahead by using the same systems that someone else has done before you. The big part of getting rid of the assumption part of it is, yes, in the beginning, you're going to make a couple guesses. You can limit those guesses by surrounding yourself with the partners and the great team. But in the end, you got to commit. You get clear on that goal, commit, and you take the action. And it's the action that gets you clearer and clearer, and you just keep repeating that cycle. Yeah. And the action is really what's going to remove a lot of those assumptions, because you're going to be assuming until you take the action. And most people who say they have a goal to buy an apartment or invest in real estate, they're always assuming good and bad because they actually never take any action.
Yeah.
Right.
Something that I'll pitch in is something I learned in the military is when we would do our planning, you always make assumptions. Every time you're doing anything that's forward looking, you're making certain assumptions, but we would keep a list of all the assumptions that we made. As we go through the process, we would try to validate as many of those assumptions as possible, and at the end of the day, you have your list of assumptions that you've been able to validate and your assumptions that are not validated. And then that's the risk that you're taking. There's a little bit of risk inherent to some of the assumptions that you make, but being able to at least understand what assumptions you've made and what the risks are for not having validated the assumptions, helps you to make decisions going forward, because you're never going to know 100% of what's going on. You're never going to see the clear picture. So when I was thinking about how to answer your question, that's really what popped to mind is, as you're underwriting, especially, keep track of the assumption you make, go back, try to validate as many of those assumptions as possible. And, don't be afraid to make a decision with 80% of the information in front of you, and, just understand what the risks are.
Perfect. That's awesome. It does help a lot. And another thing I was thinking is just about the inspiration. What do you do and how do you find inspiration?
We find the traction system for building the business is pretty good, the book traction. But inspiration comes to really, it's having that strong why, yes. But if you never look at your why throughout the year, then it won't be as important to you. And it's the same with goals. If you never look at your goals throughout the year or throughout the quarter, they kind of evaporate. And a lot of people do this in the new year. They set hundreds of goals. And then I just wrote a LinkedIn post, but like 2/3 of the people will abandon those goals that they wrote in January within a month. And, those could be health goals, business goals, whatever. So coming up with a system to inspire you, and everybody's going to be different. I like to do the miracle morning. I meditate in the morning. I journal. I look at my goals. That gives me motivation, because there's many days, like, when I'm doing a refinance on a loan and they're telling me the interest rate's 8%, I'm not really motivated to keep doing that. But how do I get that motivation? I look at that goal. What's my quarter goal here's my year end. What's my quarter? Okay, this is on my goal, and this is why I'm doing it. Here's my vision of my family, of the things I want to achieve. And if I read that in the morning, that inspires me. That gives me the motivation to get up and go. Maybe I'm going and talking with 10 investors that day, and maybe 5 of them are brand new, and I know it might not ever go anywhere. My inspiration, my motivation comes from looking at my goals, from looking at my achievements, what I want to do. So that's how I do it.
couple things you mentioned, resonated with me. I'm redoing my affirmations and for my miracle morning. And it's something I've been working on. It hasn't been an easy thing, but something I've been working on all week is those affirmations every day. And making sure those affirmations match up with the goals that I've set. But and the other thing is I'm rereading the book Traction right now too. So trying to get that EOS thing set up. I have one employee right now, but we're going to grow in 23. That's one of my big goals. But anyway, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that.
What would you do differently if you would start today, but knowing what you know and also knowing where we are at the economic cycle?
That's a great question. First and foremost, get started. So don't let fear hold you. But if I was going to change what I would do, I would get better at envisioning that goal for my revenue for the business or my cash flow for the business. And are you building a business? That's something that's worth discussing. If you're going to be in the syndication space, you have to build a brand and you have to build a business. And so understanding what it takes to build a business and maybe getting a coach who knows how to build a business is worthwhile. A lot of what I did in the beginning was read a lot of books and a lot of podcasts, and we did a lot of trial and error. And that's good to a degree, but you really can accelerate whatever that goal that you have for your investing career by following a mentor or following a coach. And it's simply a lot of especially when you're doing syndication, a lot of the cash flow and revenue won't be there for years. Mm-hmm. So if I was going to do it again, make sure you have something that adds cash flow and income to your business while you're doing the syndication. So I'm buying some of the meshes, and we do short-term rentals on the side for that reason, because it adds cash flow while we wait for these big multifamily deals to cycle in and out. Once you get on a roll, yes, if you do 2 syndications a year, or you're buying 2 apartments a year and they start selling, you can get on that rhythm where you're selling every year. But in the beginning, you got to look at it like, how am I going to grow this business? I do need revenue. It's the blood of a business. That's what I would address. That's what I would look at if I was trying to build it again.
Yeah, I think those are good points. What I'll add is just realize that I think there's been a lot of hype in the last couple of years. With how the market is appreciated. A lot of people have kind of fallen out of the fundamentals, and there's a quote by Warren Buffett that a lot of people have been sharing recently. When the tide goes out, you find out who's been swimming naked. And so when you start looking at, what are the fundamentals of real estate investing, time is one thing that is always on your side, and the second thing that I think a lot of people have made mistakes with is looking at protecting your downside. That's what a lot of people who are in trouble right now are in trouble because they got some bridge loans with, floating rates.
Right.
They did not look to protect their downside. They did not buy the rate cap insurance because, they get a 3.5%, 4% bridge loan, and who cares if it's a floating rate? And now that rates are at 8%, they can't make ends meet. So I would say, fortunately, we didn't take any loans like that. Every loan that we had is fixed rate. But I would say, now especially, stick to the fundamentals. Make sure you can hold for longer. Make sure you have time on your side, and always have a little bit of flexibility on the back end. And I definitely agree with everything Chris said. There's a lot of, with syndication, there's not a lot of cash flow in the middle. There's revenue at when you purchase assets from acquisition fees. And there's revenue when you sell, but there's not a lot in between for syndicators. So, come up with a model that can give you a little bit of both. Figure out how to get that cash flow going on, or stack things up to where you have a couple of sales every year. But it takes time. So anyway, speaking of time, we are pretty much out of time. So one last question for each of you. And Chris, you get to go first. How can listeners learn more about you?
Sure. Yeah, you can visit our website, valkyriegroup.com. We have an open deal, like I said, a 224 unit in Houston, Texas. It's all on the website. Or you can check out our upcoming vacation rental masterclass. That's on the website as well. And if you want to connect with me in person, I'm on LinkedIn. Look up Christopher Levarek. I post a lot on there. So come connect and we'll go from there.
All right. Thanks, Chris. And Mario, same question for you. How can listeners learn more about you?
Yes, I through the website. It's Texas Real Estate Investing Group LLC, or directed to LinkedIn or Facebook. Also, Tex Alb Real Estate Investing Group, which Texas and Albania,
Okay.
and LinkedIn through my first name and last name, Mario Rapaj.
All right.
Thank you.
And we'll have links to all of that in the show notes. So the last thing I'll say, thanks to both of you for coming on the show today. Very much appreciate it. A lot of little precious gems we talked about today. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Hey, if you like that episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button. But more importantly, if you haven't joined our multifamily educational community, the Tribe of Titans, yet, you are missing out. So get yourself 30 days free by clicking the link below in the description, or go to thetribeoftitans.info, and we'll see you there.